When negative situations come up, it makes sense that we would want to address the situation or problem or make appropriate changes. But so often in our life, this does not happen because we either give up or we accept defeat, or we simply feel that nothing we will do will actually make any effective changes. A lot of times, this is due to a phenomenon called learned helplessness. Today, we're going to talk about what exactly that means and how we can instead learn to reprogram our brain to help us feel empowered and in control of our lives. Welcome back. My name is Nena and I'm a life coach that specializes in personal development. Here at this channel, we talk all about our emotional well-being, understanding our own psychology, and leading our best life possible. So if you aren't already a subscriber, please take a moment and become one because we definitely want you to stay connected. So what exactly is learned helplessness? It's a condition where people feel completely powerless in situations, and they feel that nothing that they will do can ultimately affect or control a situation. Sometimes this can come about because of trauma, or it can also come about from a perceived sense of consistent failure in one or several areas of our life. It's really called learned helplessness because it is in fact learned. We do not come into this world with the perception that we have no control over what is happening to us or what will happen to us in our lifetime. It is something that is learned through experiences or sometimes conditioned into us. So today we'll talk more about what really it is, where it really comes from and why it happens, and most importantly, what we can do to break through this phenomenon and really start living our best lives. So for example, a person may have a negative experience in a relationship or in a series of relationships, which could ultimately lead them to feel hopeless or helpless in this area, which could lead them to give up on love or the idea of marriage altogether. That is a great example of learned helplessness. But interestingly enough, this does not always happen and only happens sometimes. Sometimes people are able to have a situation or a series of situations happen and they do not experience learned helplessness. So what researchers have come to find is that it oftentimes comes down to the person's explanatory style for the situation. So if they believe that this is something that will always happen to them, that this is a permanent situation, and that the reason for the situation comes from themselves, they are much more likely to experience learned helplessness. So in other words, if we feel that these events are fleeting or situational, there's a good chance we will get past them. But if we have a pessimistic attitude and we feel that these things are unavoidable or inescapable, there is a good chance that we will develop this sense of learned helplessness. This is something that often really starts in childhood, where we have memories of what we think of as perceived failures that really stick with us and start to affect our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors as an adult. So some of the things that we might look for as signs that we're suffering from this is a low self-esteem, a lack of motivation, a feeling that we just want to give up on things, or we don't really want to try too hard. We may feel that we get frustrated really easily, and we have difficulty accepting help when we really need it, or even asking for that help. It's important to understand that if we let these feelings kind of fester inside of us and we don't address them, it can lead to feelings of anxiety and depression. So it's definitely something that we want to start to look at if we feel that it may be the case for us personally. So what can we do about it? Psychologists have determined that just like we can experience learned helplessness, we can learn to experience learned optimism, which will be the eventual goal. But before we can get there, we need to actually address our learned helplessness. So let's go over 7 ways that we can actually do just that. So the first couple principles of tackling this learned helplessness really come from cognitive behavioral therapy. And this is something that I recently made a video on, so I'm going to go ahead and link that down below for you. But basically, this is a form of therapy that can be performed as a form of self-therapy, which is what the video kind of walks through step by step. But it can also be performed with the help of a mental health professional, of course. But basically, what this form of therapy does is it takes a look at our automatic negative thoughts and irrational beliefs and really teaches us to look at these beliefs in a much more realistic way and ultimately find replacement thoughts and beliefs that are a lot more positive for us. So that is where we are going to start. So the first actual step is looking at the origin of our learned helplessness. And I know that can be very painful and make us feel very, very vulnerable. But without this step, there's really no way to go forward. We really need to think back and really determine how we learned these thought patterns and behaviors to begin with. Where is the root of the issue? The second part is also part of that cognitive behavioral therapy, which is to identify those negative thought patterns, the automatic thoughts and irrational beliefs that are really associated with that learned helplessness. So for example, if we had the bad relationship, does that ultimately make us interpret that to mean that we are worthless or we are unattractive or we are hopeless? So we want to really work ourselves through the process of really understanding what these automatic thoughts are telling us so we can really know our thought patterns, so we can really start to address it. And again, we can do that by checking out that video, and we want to look at the ABC method for really addressing these irrational beliefs and these negative automatic thoughts. And the third part of this is simply to just think about any type of reinforcement that we are giving these thoughts ourselves. So how are we feeding into this problem? Because a lot of times we actually contribute to this more than we realize. We want to really identify what type of reinforcement we are giving to these negative thoughts and these irrational beliefs. Now, once we have addressed those three very difficult and often painful questions that can make us feel very vulnerable, we want to go ahead and move on to something much more positive, which is trying to adopt that more positive explanatory style for the different events that happen to us in our life. So one way we can do this is to look for external explanations for situations and not always assuming that it is an internal reason. So for example, if we did bad on a math test, maybe it's not because we aren't intelligent. Maybe it's because yesterday our daughter was up all night screaming and we couldn't get any sleep, or maybe we forgot to have breakfast, or maybe we almost got into an accident that morning and our brain wasn't really in the right place. So there could be external reasons and not always internal reasons for things happening in our life. We have to understand that so many of these events are simply situationally specific, and that does not mean that it's going to be the case every single time. We can't always internalize it, and we need to break the habit of taking responsibility for things that are oftentimes way beyond our own control. The fifth thing that we can do is to start to really adopt much more positive and optimistic thoughts about our own life. So we talked about how we've been conditioned to have these negative automatic thoughts. We can learn to replace them with things that are much more empowering for us and much more realistic. So for example, we can tell ourselves, well, that was one day, but today is a new day and I can make this day any day I want. Or this may have been the case in the past, but that does not have to be the case for the future. Or whatever we need to tell ourselves that is much more positive, that fills us with optimism about our life in general. The sixth thing that we can do is to start to set very specific goals for ourselves. So often when we suffer from learned helplessness, we don't really set goals at all because we don't feel that we can achieve them. We don't have a healthy self-esteem. So if we can learn to set goals and actually achieve those goals, it really reinforces to ourselves that we are fully capable and in control of our life. So one way to do this is by using the SMART method, the SMART method. So it's just simply a method that we can use to make sure that those goals really get achieved. So the S stands for specific. So we know exactly what that goal is. The M stands for measurable. We need to be able to know that we are really working towards that goal. There needs to be a form of measurement. A stands for achievable. These are goals that we can actually reach if we put the time and effort into them. The R is for relevant, that this is a goal that has importance and meaning and relevancy in our life. And the T is for timed. So we have a sense of when we need to complete this goal by so it actually gets accomplished. So this is just simply a way of helping us to set goals and to achieve goals. And when we do that, it's going to just reinforce that principle that we are fully capable of achieving goals and of living our best life. And the seventh thing that we can do is to actually seek out help and support if we need it. So oftentimes this learned helplessness really starts to bring about some traumatic feelings and some negative feelings when we start to address it. So if we feel that we need to talk to a friend or a family member or a mental health professional, we want to make sure that we actually go ahead and do that to help ourselves work through these feelings and again have that support that we need while we are going through something that is very uncomfortable for us to do so. So please know that learned helplessness is certainly something that you can overcome, and it is a mindset that you can transform. We have to understand also that we are always in control of our lives. We can't always control everything that happens to us, but we can certainly learn to control how we think about it, how we feel about it, and how we ultimately react to it. And that is where we can actually gain that control of our life. So I hope you work through this process because you will be able to see how amazing you are as a person and that you are fully capable and certainly not helpless. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like it and share it with someone else who may need to hear the same message today. Also, again, if you aren't already a subscriber, please take a moment and become one. We definitely want you to stay connected, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day.